Let's start with the name, Stacey. To some, it means nothing. It's just a common name, but in the incel community, Stacey is anything but neutral. She's the girl next door and the girl who ignored you. She's the one who smiled at the Chad and looked through you like she would look through a glass. She's the woman you fantasize about and the one that you resent with equal force as well. But but here's the truth. Stacey isn't real. She's she's not a person. She's a projection, a symbol created by a community struggling with rejection and struggling with invisibility and unmet longings. And she becomes the scapegoat because someone has to be. And it's easier to blame an archetype than to sit in the pain of being unwanted. In this episode, we're not here to mock the Stacey stereotype. We're here instead to understand what it represents. Because when we understand the symbol, we get a little closer to the wound beneath that symbol. And when we get closer to the wound, we have a chance finally to potentially experience healing. So, so let's start off by going back. We see every culture creates its myths. These are stories that help people make sense of their pain, stories that explain the injustice of being passed over, the confusion of feeling invincible, the sting of being told that you're not enough. In incel culture, one of those myths is Stacey. She's she's often paired with Chad, where Chad, we talked about earlier today, is the alpha male who wins every woman. Stacey she's the hyper feminine woman who only wants men like Chad. She's painted as vain, as shallow, as status driven. She dates the jocks and she parties. She's sexually open, but never to you. And she's everything you want and nothing you can have. And so she becomes the enemy. But here's what we miss when we only focus on Stacey as a stereotype. You see, she didn't appear out of nowhere. She actually emerged from a longing, from real stories of real men who have felt unseen, and from countless of moments where looking at women with hope was always met with silence or laughter or even worse, indifference. And from the slow, painful realization that the world doesn't owe you affection, but your heart still aches for it, this is where this story has come from. It's in this space of tension between desire and denial that Stacey was born. But when pain isn't processed, it gets projected. And when projection becomes collective, it forms a culture that says, these kinds of women are the reason that I am suffering. And that's where things get dangerous. Because once someone is put into that scapegoat zone, their humanity basically stops mattering at all. You stop seeing them as full people. And instead, you start to see them as the source of your humiliation, your shame, and your loneliness. And when enough people agree with you, that story calcifies and it becomes the gospel. But again, Stacey, let me remind you, Stacey is not real. She's an emotional placeholder, a way to avoid looking at the deeper grief, the fear that maybe you're unlovable, that maybe no one will ever choose you, that maybe you'll always be invisible. These are the unbearable thoughts. And so the mind searches for relief and it creates a symbol. And this is a villain. It tells itself she didn't see me because she's broken. She's shallow. She's just like all the other Stacys. And while that might sound soothing and it might appease the ego temporarily, it doesn't touch the wound that you are carrying, because scapegoating can't give you what you actually want. And what you want, I think, is to be seen or to be understood, to be wanted. And Stacey, real women, actual individuals, they can't do that for you if you've already decided who they are before you even meet them. And therein is the trap. The more you reduce someone to a type, the more you lose your ability to relate to them as a fellow human being. And the more you build stories around rejection, the harder it becomes to risk real connection. And connection, like deep human mutual connection, is what you actually long for. But here's the good news. You see, the pain that birthed the Stacey myth isn't shameful. It's not something to mock or even to minimize. It's something instead to listen to. Because underneath every stereotype is a story. And underneath every story is a soul. So let's keep looking. Let's keep going and looking deeper, not just at the symbol, but at the system that created this mess. Let's look at what happens when men are taught that their worth comes from being chosen, and what it does to them when they were never chosen. Because only when we name the pain honestly can we start building something more real. So again, let's dig deeper still. You see, the idea of Stacey doesn't come from nowhere. It's shaped by media, and it's reinforced by cultural cues, and it's amplified by rejection. It's in film and television that she's often the love interest who never sees the awkward guy standing right in front of her. In music, she's the girl with high standards and shallow tastes. In ads, she's a face that's flawless and forever out of reach. And when young men grow up constantly exposed to these images, and then when they additionally experience rejection in their real lives, the mind does what it does best. It connects the dots. And the story it often lands on is this: I'm not seen because I'm not Chad. And women like Stacey only want Chads. So the problem must be her. It's a simple logical chain. And like many simple things, it's powerfully emotional, even if it's not entirely true. Because the more, the reality is far more complicated than we might think. Not all women are Stacey's, and not all rejections are shallow. And not all longing is answered by being wanted. But if you're hurting, you're not usually in a place to explore that nuance, are you? See, pain has this demand for clarity, and clarity often comes in the form of blame. Blame makes the world feel far more controllable. Blame says, if I could just become what she wants or destroy what she wants, then I would feel okay. And that's the dark pole of the Stacey mess. It tempts you with with two equally harmful responses, either idolization or hatred. You either put her on a pedestal and chase after her endlessly, believing perhaps that your worth depends on her approval, or you drag her through the mud, believing that your worth depends on rejecting hers. But in both scenarios, she holds the power. She, she determines your value, and she becomes the mirror through which you measure your manhood. That's, that's not connection though, is it? That sounds far more like captivity. And the only way to break free is to stop making her the measure of your meaning. Let's just pause here a moment. Have you ever asked yourself why being chosen feels like proof of your worth? And where was it that you learned that mindset? Who taught you that unless someone sees you as desirable, you're nothing? See, that isn't a truth at all. It's a trauma response. It's a distortion that's been passed down through culture and pain. And it's the wound beneath the Stacey mess. And until we deal with that wound, we're going to keep turning women into symbolic villains, blaming them for not healing what was never theirs to fix. Because here's the reality. No one can carry the burden of your self-worth for you. It's not Stacey, not Chad, not anyone. Your value isn't decided by who chooses you. It's revealed by how deeply you choose to live in alignment with what's true. And what's true is this. The moment you stop reducing women to fantasies or foes is the moment that you become capable of real relationship. Because real relationship, it requires mutuality. It requires risk. It requires the humility to approach someone as a full human being, not as a reward or as a threat. And it's that kind of relating that takes real work. It means doing the hard, unglamorous labor of healing your own self-perception so that you don't project your pain onto others. It means recognizing that yeah, some women might be cruel or dismissive, but most aren't. Stacey isn't every woman. Most are navigating their own fears, their own trauma, their own search for connection in their own spheres. And when you see that, something begins to soften. You stop looking for someone to blame, and instead you start looking for someone who can understand. And more importantly, you start allowing yourself to be understood. And that's the beginning of intimacy. Not just being near someone, but actually being known by that someone. And you can't be known if you're hiding behind resentment. You can't be known if you're locked in a story that says, she'll never want me, so I'm going to make her the enemy. That story might protect you from vulnerability, but it also protects you from experiencing love. So what would it mean to put that myth away? What would it mean to meet women as people, not as projections? What would it mean to to stop chasing validation and instead to start building relationships that are based on shared humanity? The answers to these questions are not easy, but they're essential. Because when you stop scapegoating, you start seeing someone. And when you start seeing, you create this space for her to be herself and for you to become more of yourself as well. Let's keep going. When you start seeing women as people again, not as symbols or threats, you begin to notice something that's quite profound, and that is that their lives are also filled with pain as well. Stacey isn't just a fantasy of perfection. She's also convenient. She's a convenient container for projected blame. But real women, even the ones who look like the stereotype, are often carrying invisible battles. They have they've internalized misogyny and objectification and performance pressure. There's a fear of being reduced to their bodies or used for someone else's validation. And so when men project onto women the responsibility for their pain, it it not only dehumanizes these women, but it also disempowers the men who are doing so. Because now your healing depends on someone else changing, someone else apologizing, someone else validating you. But but healing doesn't work that way. Healing begins instead with reclaiming your power to see clearly and to live differently. See, the Stacey archetype thrives in places where men have been taught to see connections as a conquest, where vulnerability is a weakness, and where being wanted is the only sign of being worthy. And so it makes sense that Stacey becomes a threat because she doesn't just symbolize rejection, she actually symbolizes all the things that you think that you're missing. But but here's the deeper wound. The deeper wound is that it's not just about not getting the girl. No, it's about feeling like you don't matter and that no one sees you, that no one is curious about your story, and that no one finds you valuable enough, especially to love. And that's the ache underneath anger. And it's worth naming because once you name it, you can stop outsourcing your dignity to other people's choices. You can you can stop demanding that they see you, and you can start seeing you yourself. You see, that shift from projection to being present is the key turning point. And it's terrifying when you first experience it because it asks you to give up a story that you've held for a very long time. A story that says, I'm a victim of shallow women, or I'm doomed to be unwanted because of them. Letting go of that story means facing uncertainty of a new storyline. It means taking responsibility for your own growth. It means learning how to relate differently to women, yes, but also to yourself. It means that you're choosing integrity. Remember, integrity isn't about, it's not about being morally perfect. It's instead about being whole, experiencing wholeness. It's about aligning your inside and your outsides. It's about refusing to live from bitterness, even when you have every reason to be bitter. And, and that's where real masculinity lives. Not in a domination or denial, but instead in grounded self-awareness. You, you don't need to become what Stacey wants. You don't need to destroy who you think she is. You need instead to reclaim who you are. You need to stop measuring your manhood by who desires you. And instead you need to start measuring it by how you show up with honesty and with humility and true courage. And as you do this, you'll find that the world is going to start to look different. Not because people change overnight, but instead because you're no longer caught in this loop of blaming and projecting. Instead, now you're building something else, something that's solid, something that has substance. Let's let's talk about intimacy again just a little bit more. Intimacy I describe as intimacy. It's just a helpful way I remember intimacy. And what if the deepest hunger that you have isn't to be wanted, but instead to be known? What if you're really after something more than sex, something more than dominance, something more than validation, and perhaps that's your presence, to sit across from someone and to feel safe, to share who you are without having to put armor on, to be received not as a fantasy, but as a real, breathing, alive human. You can't get there through projection. You get there instead through practice, through risking kindness, through building trust slowly, and through unlearning the scripts that told you that women are threats or prizes, through seeing them as complex human beings and letting them see you in the same way as well. Because the more that you do that, the less power the Stacey myth has in your experience. She in essence stops being your enemy, and she stops being your everything that you're striving for. She just becomes a person like you. And that's where connection begins. Not in fantasy, but in reality. Not in roles that we take on, but in true relationship. So let's just bring this home for a moment. The Stacey archetype didn't ruin your life. The myth that you had to be chosen to matter, that's what ruined your life. The culture that taught you that your value was tied to desirability, the silence that met your longing, the absence of voices saying that you are enough, even if no one picks you. That's what shaped the ache that you've been experiencing all this time. And until that ache is named, it will keep demanding scapegoats in your experience. But here's the truth. Scapegoating is not going to save you. Only healing will. And healing is what begins the truth. The truth is that you were never less because someone didn't choose you. No, the truth is that you are not invisible because you aren't Chad. The truth is that Stacey is not the villain. She's not even the point at all. The point is your heart and how it's been hurting without language to describe that pain. The point is your hunger to be known and how no fantasy will ever satisfy that hunger. The point really is your humanity and how it's always been enough. So here's my invitation to you in this moment. Dismantle this myth, not by denying your pain, but instead by honoring it. Not by shaming your past, but by reclaiming your future. Not by proving your worth, but instead by living it. Because the moment that you stop asking others to define your value is the same moment that you become powerful again. The moment that you stop projecting your pain is the same moment that you begin processing that very pain in a healthy way. The moment that you stop scapegoating, that's the moment that you have the opportunity to start connecting again. And connection, like real, mutual, dignified connection, is what this is all about. So, what does it look like to move forward? It looks like questioning your assumptions. It looks like approaching women as people, not as proofs of your worth. It looks like grieving what you've lost without turning that grief into hatred. It looks like choosing integrity over and over again. It looks like practicing intimacy and letting others see into you. Such a courageous move. It looks like building a life where your value isn't held hostage by someone else's response. And that doesn't mean you won't still feel lonely or unseen, or it's no promise of stopping the hurt. But it does mean that you'll at least begin to be honest about it. And honesty is where healing truly begins. Because when you can become honest and name your ache and pain, then you no longer have to project it. When you can sit with your story and not have a scapegoat or anyone else's, that's where true healing can begin. And when you can see others as fully human, fellow human beings, you in essence give yourself permission to be one as well. So my dear listener, let Stacey go. Let go of that myth you've been hanging that has served you up to this point. Let the story that says you're only as valuable as your desirability, let that go. And in its place, consider building something new. Consider building your dignity again. Consider building your self-respect. Build the kind of life where intimacy is not a prize to be won, but instead it's a practice to be lived. Because that kind of a life, that is a life worth living. The kind of life that everything the myth could never promise or fulfill on. And that man, the one who lives in that kind of life, he's not invisible. He's actually seen. He's known. He's real. And the world needs a lot more men like him.